Welcome to the Redeemed Man podcast. I'm Nathan Dewberry, director, and today I have two great friends of mine with me. Chase is the worship director at River of Life Church in Hamilton, Georgia, and Payton Linder is community engagement coordinator at Troy University here in Columbus, Georgia. So welcome to the show, guys.
Phenix City campus, not Columbus.
Phenix City.
Got to get it right.
I forget. You guys are across the river.
Yep, no other locations, just on the river.
It's always interesting for you guys that are Columbus, Phenix City. Sometimes I do forget because I think of it as the same area. But if you live on one side of the river, you definitely don't forget.
You make it known.
Columbus.
Yeah.
Or I'm from Phenix City.
Yes, absolutely. It's a territorial thing.
Guys, I'm so glad to have you on the show. In the last few weeks, we've been talking a little bit about fatherhood. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the impacts of the fathers in your life or lack of fathers and what that looks like. We'll have a great time of discussion today. But first, I'd love to hear, Chase, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you ended up here in this area.
Yeah, so I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and it was just my mom and I. And then I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and went to Highlands College and had the opportunity to do that. And then I had the opportunity to come down to Columbus and work at a local church here in town. And that's what brought me down to good old Columbus, Georgia.
Love it.
Yes,
Love it.
yes.
And how old are you?
I am 24.
24.
24.
Awesome. Peyton, what about you? Tell me a little bit about your background. What brought you to Phenix City, Alabama?
Born and raised actually in Phenix City. Spent the first 18 years of my life there before I left for the Navy. Spent a couple years in the Navy, came back home, was in Phenix City again until my wife and I moved to Phoenix, Arizona. So that's Phoenix with an O. People are very particular about that. And if you ever have to learn how to spell it differently, it's rough. But we were out there for a few years while I completed my graduate degree. And then the good old pandemic brought us back to Phenix City and have been here and between Phenix City and Opelika pretty much for the past few years.
Yeah. And you're married, correct?
Married to my beautiful wife, India. We just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Two kids, 9 and 7. And
you got your hands full then.
Yes. Yes, we do.
Love it. So we sometimes, to get to know our guests, do a set of rapid fire questions. So we're going to try that here with both of you today. First off, what is your favorite food?
Mine, it's either sushi or a hamburger. Those are like a tie for first place. I can take either or.
Man, I love pasta or chicken. You can't go wrong with chicken.
You guys are making me hungry.
Put chicken
already.
in the pasta.
That's what I'm saying.
There you
Chicken
go.
Alfredo.
Oh, yes.
Guys, I'm ready to eat. Bring it on. If you could go anywhere right now, where would it be?
I would say Israel for me. Man, to see the Holy Land and to go there, I think that'd be pretty dope. So
After this conversation, I spent 10 days in Israel. I will tell you that story. But for me, honestly, oh man, it's so tough. I would say Sedona, Arizona. That's my favorite place. I've been all around the world here and there, but Sedona, Arizona is by far my favorite place.
Awesome. Wow. So if you're traveling, is it the beach you're going to go to or the mountains? Which one?
Mountains all day.
And I probably would say the beach. I grew up near the beach, and so I'm used to it. So I think I'm a beach guy, I think.
Gotcha. Favorite verse?
Joshua 1:9. I got it on my wrist.
Got it.
Got it. This actually was given to me after I gave my life over to Christ, and so Rock Kazakamatz means be strong and courageous, do not be dismayed.
Awesome.
And that's what Joshua would tell his troops.
Yeah.
Love it.
Good reminder every day.
Yeah. I'd say for me, Isaiah 43:17-18, when he's saying, I'm making a way through the wilderness and a way through the desert. I think for me, that was going through a hard time in my life, and I really clung to that verse, so it's always been a favorite of mine. So
Love it. Thank you guys for sharing. Yeah. We'll wrap up those rapid fire questions. But you guys, I mean, there are some similarities there. Yeah. But one of the things we're going to talk about today is a little bit of our journey. You mentioned already that you grew up with your mom and your dad wasn't present. Right. Peyton, also your dad wasn't present in your life, correct?
That's correct.
So I think for me, as I just want to hear from you guys what that was like as a young man growing up without a dad? Was there moments where you felt like you didn't belong because your dad wasn't around, or was it one of those things you just thought that was kind of normal?
Yeah, I think for me it was definitely strange. I mean, seeing friends with both parents in the household, it was like, where's my father at? So I was definitely a little bit confused and kind of envious of what other people had, and I was like, man, I would love to have a father in my house that can teach me things, play catch with me, and things like that. And so obviously my mom did her best to try to handle both worlds. But for me, it was definitely strange and not normal, I felt like. But, it was normal in the community that I was living in, but even going outside of that community with the people that I was surrounding myself with, it was like, man, there's something different between us. They have a father figure and I didn't. Yeah. So,
What about you, Peyton?
I would agree with him on the envious too. I was raised by a single mother. She was raising two kids. We were both from separate fathers. And so my older sister, every other weekend, she would go to her dad's, or on Wednesdays or Tuesday nights, she would go to her dad's. And so I was able to see that relationship. And then between Boy Scouts and church and school, you see your friends, like you said, with their dads. And it's kind of envious. What did I do? Why is he not here? That kind of guilt. So that was early on in childhood, and I think as the teenage years came, you almost became rebellious, and you owned it like you were the outcast kid that nobody wanted.
yeah.
That was kind of the character traits that I took on.
Yeah, Peyton, tell me a little bit more about, because of possibly that pain or guilt that you had in your life, how did you cope with that, and what are some of the negative impacts that happened because of your dad not being there, or at least the influence somewhat of that?
One of the best phrases I heard lately, I was talking to a spiritual leader of mine, and he basically summed up my entire childhood and youth in the one word, and it was abandonment. And I was like, oh man, somebody finally put a label on it. And that was completely true. It was... There was moments of struggles and times where I felt like I was unworthy. I wasn't loved. Like my mother, God bless her, she would say, I love you every time we got off the phone, every time we got out of the car, like almost to a point where she oversaid it, but she wanted it to be clear that, and she was the one, like he was saying, she'd go in the backyard and throw the baseball with me. She was always there. And so we had that special relationship, and I'm grateful for it. But the thing is a boy needs that male figure. And I had some male figures in my life. I had my uncle growing up. I had a youth pastor, I had some scout leaders, but they do not fill that role of father. And what's funny is when you look back, there was a group of us in high school, like 5 of us, that came together and hung out like all the time. And we all came from like broken homes. So one of them, like his parents divorced, or the other one, his dad had passed away. And a few of us, our dads had left. And so we kind of formed a bond, and it was like that. And so it really left a lot of scars. One of the worst things about it was that I knew who he was. Like I knew his name and his occupation. That was it. I did not meet him until I was 19, but because I knew his job and his occupation, that kind of formed a little bit of rage. And so anger has always been my fleshly reaction to things. And so I was filled with rage and anger a lot as a youth. I never dabbled in drugs or anything like that, really. But I was quick to destroy stuff, quick to get in fights, quick to yell. It's why I love rock music and mosh pits, that cardinal part of me. But honestly, I've embraced it now. You know what? I saw relationships, even in my own family, of kids who had fathers that were present, but they necessarily weren't good fathers. Right. And so, and the damage that has caused them in the long run, I kind of can look at it now and say, I'm all right. You know what? I've got it. I'm all right. I didn't have, even though I did not have somebody filling that role, it could have been worse if he would have been in that role and been abusive or been distant or been hateful or all these things I saw other men being to their sons. Yeah. So, and honestly, I look at the longevity of it, I'm like, I'm doing all right.
Retrospect.
Chase, what about you? What did you have any negative impacts that you saw in high school, college?
Yeah, I would say for me, I mean, maybe I struggle with the anger side of it, but it was more towards my earlier stages of life, like elementary, middle school. Man, I would lash out, just always wanted to fight somebody, just mad at the world, and I really didn't understand what it was, you know. And so people just chalked it up to like, you're just rebellious, you're just angry, you just bad temper, and I was just like, yeah, that's just me. I kind of just wore it, you know.
Yeah.
And then finally, my mom's like, you need to go see a therapist. And I was like, I don't want to. And so even just trying to figure out my emotions, like I remember going to therapy and they're like, how are you feeling today? Like, are you on the red? Are you on the green? I'm like I'm mad. Like I don't even want to be here. Yeah. And so, man, I think just being plugged into the church, I kind of got off of not getting angry as much, or at least showing my anger in a violent way of, punching walls or trying to fight people. Yeah. But I think for me, once it got to high school and even in college, it's just trying to get approval from people is kind of how it happened for me, man. I was just always searching for approval, always trying to do something to be accepted. And so even like at church, it was like, man, I'm going to go serve on this team because I want people to notice that I'm doing it. Like the heart wasn't really in the right place. So it's like, I just want to be approved and loved. And my mom did a great job of loving me and saying she loved me every day. Like, hey, I love you. I love you. I love you. But you're always missing something when you don't have that father figure. And I see my friends and see the story for me, a majority of my friends had their father figure in their life and they were great dads. And so I would see that and I'm like, man, I want that type of relationship, And so I would just try to get those approval or try to hang out with people who got fathers in their life because, they're like, oh, you're like a son to me. I'm like, yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And so, I would just try to win that approval of people and men, and even with females, of like just wanting to be accepted. Fear of rejection was big for me. I mean, even now I'm still like, man, don't reject me. Like I hate feeling that way.
I agree. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Approval. I was always fighting for approval. Yeah. Rejection is a fear.
Yeah.
So there's something there would be rejected.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think there's that passage that we all want to go from being a young child to being a man.
Right.
And we want to know that we have what it takes to be a man. Yeah. And if you don't have a father that helps affirm that in you and call you out and say, yes, you have, these talents in you, these gifts in you. And I believe you are a young man, that we're missing that approval. We're longing for that because, and you see it, like you mentioned, even people who their dad was present, but wasn't necessarily involved in their life. Sometimes they're disengaged, and that same thing is they never got that approval. Their dad never walked them from childhood to adulthood, and so they're still looking for it too. It's a gift for a dad to be able to give their blessing to their son and their daughters, and we need that. And when we don't have it, there are negative repercussions to that. Yeah. But God's grace is bigger, and He makes a way and restores and redeems those things that are broken and those things that are messed up.
He does.
Chase, who are some of the people that were in your life that filled that role as a father, or that you looked up to as what you wanted to be as a man?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my uncle also lived in the same city, and so obviously, with him being my mom's brother and all, like he was kind of that father figure for me. But majority of it was people in the church. My youth pastor, Pastor Mason Phillips, he was really that for me. Kind of just poured into me. And two other youth leaders, Maurice Scott and Melvin Mims, they really just poured into me, and Corey Avens, even those guys really just kind of just walked alongside me in different stages of my life, even to now. And so those were kind of the guys that I really relied on, especially those in the church for me.
Awesome. Yeah. It's so beautiful how the church, if really living out the call of God, brings healing. Brings restoration, brings a picture of God's kingdom, brings a picture of His goodness when the church is doing what the church is called to do.
Right.
And that's what I always say for kids that are parents who are wondering about should their kids go to youth group or not. I'm like, yes, because what happens to that is it's another voice saying the same thing that you're saying, but they're actually listening to that voice. Because as a teenager, they're already tuned you out and like, oh, I'm not so sure mom and dad know what they're talking about. Right. But when the youth leader says, they're like, oh man, he's so smart. Yeah. And you're like, I've been telling them that for like 10 years. That's true. But God's grace is good.
Yeah.
What about you? You mentioned uncle. Any other men that you're like, man, I really want to emulate what they're doing? I want my life to look like theirs?
Yeah, I had, I actually had two uncles, both living in this town, and but one I would only see like at church or at family events. The other one, my uncle Robert, he was, from my childhood and youth, he was like my prominent male figure, always there. He wasn't your cuddly, hugging kind of. I don't think I've ever gotten a hug from him, honestly. Ex-Vietnam Marine. That sums it up right there to you. He didn't know Christ when I was youth and young, but he taught me carpentry. He taught me a lot of different things. He was a quiet guy. We bicker back and forth, and that's our love language. And now I do that with people, and I'm like, oh, I see where that comes from. And so, he was there. And then in my youth, I had a youth pastor, Brother Wally. He was fantastic. He did not come to Christ until later on in life. And so he was able to really draw in the outcast in the youth group. Mm-hmm. And that's something that it just stood out to me. The way he loved people was so different than other men and other people in the church. Yeah. It wasn't about religion or rules or anything. He just loved you and loved being around you and made you feel worthy. Yeah. I mean, and to the point, it was like he told everybody, hey, my door is always unlocked. It don't matter if it's 3 p.m. or 3 p.m. If you need a place, here it is. And at one point, he had like him and his wife had multiple teens like living at their house, that kind of stuff. And I was able to see that. And God bless him, he actually just passed away. We had the funeral just a little bit ago. And to see all the people come together from all over the state of Alabama to basically praise that man's life, I'm like, yeah, he lived what he preached. Right. And not every preacher or pastor or somebody does that. I've seen bad youth pastors. I've seen bad pastors. Yeah. But he was it. It didn't matter what you did. He was going to love you through it. Wow. And that's something I'm like, you know what? I can do that. I don't need a special skill to do that.
Yeah, that's good.
It's really good. Chase, thinking about your journey, when you look back over your life, what are the things that you, based on how you grew up, how does that inform what you want your life to look like in the future? Because I think, not having your dad present sometimes can go, man, I don't even know how to do this, and lead to some fear and insecurities of stepping into fatherhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that all the time. Of like, man, I hope my wife don't ask me to build anything because your boy don't know what he's doing. You know what I mean? And so those are just little things like that. It's like, I mean, I always say like my love my dad and he's great. I mean, we don't have the best relationship, but he did teach me what not to do. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so from that, I've kind of learned, and just even being around godly men, I've just kind of picked up a little bit. But that's really why I try to surround myself with godly older men who know what they're doing, because I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I've seen it. I'm like, I feel like I can figure it out. I feel like that's probably going to be fatherhood for me, just trying to figure it out and just ask for help. But even
YouTube is a godsend.
That's what they say. But like practical things like that of like, the car breaks down. I don't know what's happening. There's something going wrong in the house. Like, I don't know how to build anything. Like just practical things like that. I just never had the experience of learning from a father figure. And so it's definitely going to be a challenge. But, I'm excited. I know that, the Lord will make a way, and he'll kind of coach me through it all, and just surround myself with the right people. But I'm very interested to see what this fatherhood would look like.
You'll be a great father. Peyton, you are already a dad. So what is that like, stepping into fatherhood, raising 2 kids? How have you overcome those fears, and how have you seen those in your life? Because I imagine there was probably some times where you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Yeah, I mean, if somebody comes out and tells you they know what they're doing with fatherhood, they're wrong. They're lying. Because you don't know. And one day your kids are going to grow up and realize, you know what, they were doing the best they can. And that's honestly been the truth. I've been blessed to have a patient wife. She honestly has the patience of a saint, because I have dropped the ball on numerous occasions on things, and she's given grace. But I will say, he's right. I had the opportunity of being raised, around carpenters and stuff like that, so I picked up some traits, but no, I comes to cars, I don't know a lot about that. There's a lot of stuff I do not know. But I know how to love and I know how to do acts of service. And so my wife will brag on me. And I said being raised by a single mother helped me in this aspect to be a better husband because I have no problem washing the dishes, doing laundry,
Right.
well, any of that kind of stuff. Like I have, she comes home and it's like, sit down. What do you want me to get ready for dinner? What do you want me, wash the dishes,
Right.
that co-parenting kind of thing. It's not, I'm the male, I wear the pants in this house. No, we're going to do this together as a team. Wow. Biblically and spiritually, yes, I'm the head of the household, but I'm not making a decision without her because I need her so much. There's no, like, I sit here with a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old. I'm like, how did my mother do this? How did she do this by herself?
Yeah.
And so even though my father wasn't there, I learned always to be present. And so like, I'll make it a habit to go out of my way to do things for my kids, try probably not to miss any event possible. Yeah. I've even said lay the groundwork is I'll pass up a job that if it pays a lot, if it's going to cause me to miss things with my kids. Like I'd rather live on a lower end so I know I'm spending the right amount of time with my children than accepting a job where I'm working 100 plus hours a week or something like that or traveling all the time. Like there's certain things I'm like, I'm not putting this in front of my family.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. Glad you're making those steps and those moves because a lot of people don't.
No.
And it's hard. I mean, there's a sacrifice to that in raising kids. So thank you for making those hard choices and raising your kids. And Chase, as we were talking about this in the fatherhood, you mentioned, I think you mentioned your dad.
Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity to have a conversation with him? And
Yeah, me and my dad, we maybe talk maybe once every couple months, and it's basically, hey, how you doing? You doing all right? Good, And so like, there's no ill will from me. Like I love him. He did the best he could. I mean, there's 6 of us total with him. I'm my mom's only child, but he has 6 children, and so now he has 3 younger ones, 5, 3, and 2, and so I'm seeing him trying to be a better dad from what it seems like with those guys, and so I know me and my brother and my sister, we tell him like, hey, you missed out with us, and you tried your best, but hey, with these younger guys, you need to take it serious and be present for them and stay in their lives and provide for them in ways that you couldn't for us, and so I think he's trying, and we'll see what happens with that. So.
Is there anything that you would, if he were sitting here today and you knew it was the last time you could talk to him, is there anything that you'd say to him that you haven't?
Yeah, man. I'd probably tell him that I love him. I mean, I really do love him. Yeah. And really what I really want for him is to accept Jesus. Yeah. And to go all in. I just seen evidence of what happened when people go all in with Jesus. And I think that would be my thing. I'll say, hey, my mom did a great job. And he always would constantly praise my mom and say, hey, she did a great job. Like I did her wrong. I should have, and things like that. And I appreciate that. That's great. But, for him to be a father figure, I feel like it's maybe a little past that. I don't have high expectations for that. But I guess for me, it's like, hey, just do right by the little ones and really just accept Jesus.
Peyton, you mentioned knowing what your dad did, and can you tell us a little bit about that journey and if you had any interactions with him, and if so, how did that go? And what does that relationship look like today?
Well, there is no relationship today. Yeah. I will say that. So I had knew his name and knew his occupation, but had never met him. Okay. And so I was 19. I had just gotten back from a deployment overseas. And I was dealing with some stuff. And so a buddy of mine, we kind of went to ball fields and we're having, some drinks. And here comes this individual to say, hey, this private property, y'all got to go. And by random, still to this day don't know. I was like, hey, do you know this fella? And they're like, yeah. So I found out, where he was, where he worked, and decided to pay him a visit. I was like, I'm a man. I'm 19. I've been deployed. I'm all this cockiness, and so went to his office, and the the secretary went in to get him, and when he came out, I introduced myself, and the very first words my earthly father had said to me was, "Oh, I know what this is about." And like that just kind of, that obviously has stuck.
Yeah.
And we talked for over an hour. It did not go well. Found out that he had lived 4 blocks from me my entire life, had seen me skateboarding in the neighborhood. He had passed me in Walmart. Like, he knew me.
Yeah.
His wife knew me. I found out he had other children. And I kind of went off the deep end. That actually was a moment in my life where I had a mental breakdown after that.
Yeah.
I went into deep alcoholism, depression, anger, became a womanizer, and it led to these years of toxic lifestyle.
Yeah.
And ended up being, because of that, led to some poor performances, discharge out of the military, and I sit here in all honesty, like, I don't remember hardly 2009. I remember my buddies and friends we talk about these stories, and I'm like, oh yeah. I remember bits and pieces. I mean, I was completely drunk that entire year. And then my mom, the patience of a saint, she had finally had enough, and she's like, look, you have to clean up your act, or I do have to let you go. And I'm like, the last person on earth that I could ever imagine giving up on me.
Yeah.
She had my bags packed at the door.
Wow.
And so I said, okay. And I took time off. I stopped going to the bar. I kind of just hid myself away for a little bit. And actually during that time is when I met India.
Yeah.
And she changed my life. India made me want to be a better man. She showed me a future.
Wow.
She's the reason I started going to church. And we just started growing this life together. And then I gave my life to Christ in November 2012. And everybody's talking about baptism. I've been baptized like 4 times as a kid. Every time they had one, I'd raise my hand. I want to be baptized. Yeah. Not caring. I just want to do it. Everybody else is doing it. The acceptance thing.
Exactly.
I got to make sure God accepts me.
Right.
But this time it was authentic. I was authentically accepting Christ.
Yeah.
And I sat down with my pastor, and I said, I cannot be baptized until I get this demon off my back. I have to make amends with my father. I said, I cannot do it. The Spirit has just struck me. And so worked up the courage, went to his office, still same place, and we had another hour-long conversation, and this time it was completely different. And that's the power of God and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
We were able to embrace. There were some tears shed.
Wow.
That was December 2012. After that, we went to his house. I met his wife. I met his kids. And just kind of saw everything there, and was like, it's not that bad. Yeah. But in the long run, I will say, God had called me to forgive him.
Yeah.
At the time, it wasn't. He called me to have a relationship with him. Yeah. But before I could progress, I had to get that. Yeah. And so much anger has been released from that. So much depression. It's just when you're able to take the thing that's been holding you back and get rid of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it opened up a door. And since that moment, I can spiritually say, since that moment, my life has drastically changed.
Wow.
You mentioned you coming to faith and the anger being removed. As you've grown closer to God, has there been challenges due to the limited relationship you had with your dad and how you view God or how you approach God?
Absolutely. That was asked of me quite a few years ago, and trying to build that and understand that has been tough. Yes, I felt abandoned my entire life, and therefore I did not put that much clout into Jesus, into God, and all this. But then to actually come to know Jesus and know that love like I do now, like he never abandoned me. He never set me
right.
away. And I have an opportunity now, we could roll around in that anger. We can roll around in that hatred, or we can say, you know what, that was the path I was given. How can I take those battle scars and help somebody who's been in that same situation? For me, I look at it as historically, a son would always do what the father's occupation was. If your dad was a carpenter, you were going to be a carpenter, a potter, that same thing.
Yeah.
Jesus' stepfather was a carpenter, so Jesus naturally became a carpenter.
Right.
That's not so much now, this day and age, but we're still, the kids who do not have fathers are still like this outcast of society. And the same they were, 1,000, 2,000 years ago, the outcast of society. Yeah. But if we can understand that, like, we still have a heavenly Father, and we can do His will. We can do His So my life, regardless what my job is, I'm ministering. I'm going out trying to do His will and be effective in the community. So I'm able to take that walk. Wow. And so even though I'm not over here doing an occupation of earthly father, I'm doing a calling from a heavenly Father, and I'm okay with that.
Love it. What an awesome perspective to have. Yeah. That you're following in the footsteps of your heavenly Father. Yeah. I mean, that's such a beautiful picture. Chase, tell me a little bit about how you came to know Christ in a personal way, and then has your lack of a father's involvement in your life impacted how you relate to God?
Yeah, for sure. So my mom, love her to death. She was like, "Hey, we're going to church." Like, grew up in church. Like, as young as I can remember, we was in church every day. It didn't matter. If I was sick, you're going to church. I remember throwing up, like throwing up on the church chair, being sick. And I was like, praise God. Like, at least you went to church. I'm like, okay. And so I grew up in church, and that's kind of really how my relationship formed. It was really my mom's relationship until I got into my youth group, and that's when it became my own relationship with God, and it wasn't my mom's. And so that's kind of 8th grade, 9th grade is kind of when I finally was like, okay, this is my relationship now, and I'm really going to kind of go all in for God. But viewing God as a father, I think that was super hard for me. I remember even being in college, a couple years ago, and someone saying like, he's like your father. And I was like, nah, he's a father, but like, is he though? It was just so hard for me to understand that or fathom that, because I've never had that. So to hear like, God is your father, it's like, yeah, but like, he's not, like, he's here, but it's just weird to think about that concept of to me, like, of God being a father. And so I remember I would struggle with that of like, I would pray to God, obviously, and, Father God, I love you, and things like that. But it was just like, but like, do I truly like accept him as being a father who cares for me, has the best interest for me, and things like that? And, it was kind of hard to really kind of to lean into that and to trust in that. And I think for me recently, just going through a season, I felt like I truly got to see the fatherhood side of God. Or, it was always there. It was just my eyes were just finally open to seeing it. And so that's kind of, for me, it was like, okay, like, God, you really are a father. You really do love, and you really do have the best for me. And it's just a matter of just accepting that and then seeing that and believing that. So
God is good.
Yeah.
Our journeys are all different. But we're on a journey. And the cool part is God continues to work, continues to move, continues to change us and transform us. Both of you guys mentioned seeking approval and not getting that from a dad. Do you find that in your relationship with God, sometimes you try to perform for him versus and seeking his approval and feeling like when you don't measure up that he doesn't approve of you?
I'll let the performer answer first.
Yeah, I would say for me, just because working in a church, it's so easy for me to try to perform for the approval of, the pastor or for the people. And it's so easy to just, if you're not careful, your heart can really be in the wrong place with that. And so that's something that I definitely try to have in check and have in line when it comes to that. But it's so easy for me to, just little things like, you're like, oh, I'll go pick up that trash. Like, but I see like my pastor maybe standing in the distance, like, oh yeah, I could pick that up. But like, just little things. Sometimes you can subconsciously do things because you want the approval of people. And you want people to validate what you're doing and to see you and accept you. And so I think for me, especially in the line of field that I'm in right now, I would say, yeah, there's definitely those challenges. I don't think I struggle with it as much as I used to when I was younger.
Yeah.
But there's some times where I have to, keep myself in check. Like, hey, what are you doing this for? Like, are you looking for the approval of men, or are you doing this because you really just love God and, want to do the right thing? And so,
what about you, Peyton?
No, I agree 100%. I think the approval, the spirit of approval is always there in anything I do. Specifically for people in the church. I mean, you come into church and you realize that you have certain men, certain leaders. You have them on a pedestal, and you're like, I need their approval. I need I need them to see me, to notice I'm working, and so you start doing certain things, or you try to go out of your way to do certain things. I did that very young in my walk. I even did that in my youth, like when I was at church, like, hey, I'll do what you need. Like, I was part of a team. We would travel and do different churches, but as soon as I walked away from the church, like, I'm causing chaos. Like, but I was going to get the approval of whoever was in front of me, and I would change how I acted in the situations. And now, as an adult, I don't really do that as much anymore. I see myself in situations like, okay, I can catch that and stop or whatever. But something I've had to learn, and I think has come with this walk, is even if somebody in the church is in a power of leadership, you have to be careful of putting them on a pedestal, because they will disappoint you, they will let you down, and then those feelings, those scars of abandonment, start creeping their way back in, and then that'll make you look at the church bad, but it's because of how one person acted, and so now I have to look at God and say, okay, God, I'm not doing this for them, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for your love. And honestly, it doesn't matter if I'm speaking in front of 1,000 people, 10 people, and I'm having coffee with one person. If I'm not loving them because I love Christ, then what am I actually doing it for? And so that's something I think we have to learn as we get through this walk, is we don't have to do anything for his approval. He done everything for us. Like, we just have to love him. That's all he wants us to do.
That's it.
And trying to portray that message is something that I've had to work on. It's not working for something, it's accepting he's already done something and just loving him for it.
Oh, that's good. We've talked a little bit about how hard it was early on, some of the struggles in adulthood. What would you say is the hardest thing today about not having a good relationship with your dad at this point in your life? What is the most difficult?
Man, I would say for me, just being a single guy, just, with dating and things like that, like, I'm not going to my mom asking for dating advice. Like, love her to death. I'm sure
I understand that.
I'm sure she would love.
That would be a bad thing to get a woman's perspective.
Right, but just not going to my mom. And I'm sure she would love to. I'm sure she would. But like, I'm not going to my dad either. Like, there's just no way you're giving me any, you know what I mean? And so for things like that, it's kind of hard, or just, just day-to-day manly things of like, like if I wanted to do a project, it's like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know what to do when it comes to my car's breaking down. I'm not calling my dad. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's just little practical things like that. Like, man, I wish that, that I could have that relationship, or, because to most people, like, dad is like your superhero. Like, dad fits it all. Like, dad, you can just lean on dad because dad got it. And, and it's like, I have a father, but I can't lean on him and that, you know what I mean? And so for me, sometimes I just try to do it by myself and just try to carry it on my own. And obviously that doesn't work either. You know what I mean? And so, and then, with viewing God as a father, sometimes it's hard to view him as a father. So it's like, I'm not going to rely on God. And so you just try to carry all of this pressure and all of this weight. And it's like, I don't have to do that. But because of, I think, how I grew up and not having a father present, it's so easy to just be like, hey, I'll just figure it out myself. I'll just do it on my own. And so I think that's, for me, a challenge of not having a father in life.
How have you seen God show up? Because you mentioned just recently just how that's changed in your life in the last several years. How have you seen him show up? And be proof that he is that provider.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, even with college and like going to college and not knowing how I was gonna get through this, I was like, man, I know I need to go here, but how am I gonna afford it? And I don't even know how it got paid for, but like God providing for things like that, and just little practical things. Even with this past season, like, man, God just showing that He's a restorer and that He, that He still loves me in spite of, and that. He'll bless me even in spite of, and things like that. Like, it's just things that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Of like, I remember like I had a car breakdown for me, and I was like, man, like I need this car. Like, what am I gonna do? And then like a week later, I got a car for free, and it's like, all right, God, like you, all right, like you do love me, or like, man, I'm like, man, I don't know if this bill's gonna get paid. How's this? Like, what's gonna happen here? And God's like, hey, here's a job. You know what I mean? It's like it just like God just really provided, and it was just like even in a season where it was just hard to really kind of. You really had no choice but to rely on Him. He's like, hey, I got you. Like you can lean on me, and I'll provide. You just got to trust in me. And that's really been a sweet moment, I think, for me this season, just seeing that.
Man, that's so beautiful of how God's shown up
Yeah.
in sometimes situations that are scary.
Right.
And I think that's such a good reminder, though, that He is a good Father.
Right.
Like He shows up in the worst. And even times where we don't see Him, it's often after that we begin to see that He was there in it, protecting us, caring for us, providing for us.
Exactly.
Peyton, what about you? In the season of life where you are today, what's the hardest part about not having a good relationship with your dad today?
I can honestly sit here and say at this point in my life, there's really nothing. Like I've kind of left that baggage behind. That has taken a lot of time. That has taken a lot of practice. But right now, it's like I kind of know my lot in life. I kind of know my in and outs for the day-to-days. If there are things I need help with, I have individuals I call. But I've been in this walk long enough to know, like, hey, I don't need that guy for something. Like I do. There are moments in time where, like, do I wish I could go to golf course with my dad or something like that, or that father figure? Absolutely. But you know what? That's okay. So I just know that's what I'm going to try to my best to do is gift my children with that. But honestly, right now it's all right.
Yeah.
Kind of embrace you embrace the no father lifestyle.
Yeah. So it's, as we've talked about dads, it's really epidemic, the lack of fathers in homes today.
Yeah.
What do we do as believers to change that scenario, to improve as the church, to love people and to help men step into that role of as father and to stay as a father?
You're married. You tell us. Even
Peyton, what do you think is the way that we can change the culture?
Let me start over. It has to start in the heart. And obviously we can say it has to be in the church. The church needs to set an example. Yeah. The issue is right now the church at large is going through so many struggles and changes and stuff. They're having problems. Yeah. And so it has to start in the heart of men. We have to start setting an example. So my biggest thing is, like, if you can somehow become influential in a teenager's life or a young person's life, whether that's being a youth minister, a coach, a scout leader, a teacher, something, but you show them how it is to be a man. Right. And being a man is not being tough. It's not, being able to throw a punch. Like, and when I was raised, being a man, you never showed your feelings. I get that. That's cool. Like, I'm kind of the same way in a certain point. I think I'm on the tail end of that that spectrum. But it's being able to embrace, like, being a true man is being able to care for others and take care. And so we have to be able to show that to the next generation. Yeah. We have to be able to teach them that. You're right. There is an epidemic right now. I think it's the statistic is over 80% of children come from fatherless or broken homes. Yeah. So the whole image of a married couple with 2 kids, white picket fence, 2-story house, like, that's gone. Like, that's not what kids see anymore. Wow. And so we're raised in a time now where we're having to deal with kids who single moms, single dads, two moms, two dads. You know, this whole just blend of nobody knows what a family looks like.
Right.
And so I believe it's up to us Christian men to start setting an example. And so we need to hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be able to say, hey, that's not how you act. That's not what a man does. That's not how a man responds. I need somebody to call me out on that stuff. And
Yeah.
and God bless, I'll call you out too.
Real
But
talk, yeah.
and being open and saying, all right, I struggle in this aspect of my life. So men need to be accountable with each other.
Yeah.
But they also need to be influencers in the community around them. Don't be that guy who's standing on the sidelines yelling at a 9-year-old's baseball game. Like,
Right.
that's not a leader. That's not a dad.
Yeah.
Be the one that coaches them, teaches them, trains them, teaches them how to love and treat women.
Right.
And if we can start setting that example for our youth and then for other men in the church,
Absolutely.
you can have a ripple effect. And my whole kind of philosophy is like, if I can affect 3 people and like teach those 3 people like these traits, then they can go and those 3 teach 3 and those 3, you know,
Yeah.
before long, that multiplication takes massive effect.
Absolutely.
And so we have to start. And I mean, it's imperative that we focus on holding each other accountable and training up the youth. Like, we have to.
We always ask all of our guests, what does redemption mean to you? Chase, in your own words, can you share what it means to you?
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate redemption story is Jesus dying on the cross and forgiven of the sin. And, you know, when you think of redemption, you think of that underdog and they come from underneath and they win. It's like, yeah. And so that's kind of what it feels like for me. It's like, you know, like even when the odds are stacked against you, like you can have a story and you can be,
So
the
true.
overcomer and, you know, all else is not veiled. You know what I mean?
Great. Peyton?
Dude, he knocked it out of the park on that one. That's kind of what I was thinking too. Is that underdog story, redemption itself is being able to take something that can be perceived as not having any value, no worth, nothing, and then make it this ultra high quality thing that everybody wants. And I feel like that's what Jesus does for us. I mean, I can see myself before him.
Yeah.
Just as bad as it was. And to see what he's done. I mean, he's literally set me on a new path, set me on a course. And that's the love he has for each of us.
Yeah.
And if we could all grab that love, imagine how much greater this place would be.
Right.
Yeah. And don't you think it's an amazing story of redemption and restoration, even in your own life, of being able to raise 2 beautiful kids and love them and teach them the things of God. And even though that's not your story, it's the story of the next generation in your life.
Absolutely. That's 100% true. I believe that's what we're called to do. I've always said it, and it's so weird. Like when I was a kid, I didn't pray that much, but one prayer was, God, if you ever give me a son, I'll do whatever you want. And how was it like 3 weeks after my son was born is when I felt that calling into ministry.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And now it's like building a legacy of Christ in him. Like, he loves church. That's his happy place. Like he wants to be involved in church. He wants to do all this stuff. And so if I can, honestly protect him from those struggles, like those battles that I've had to go through, just set him up on a better path of success. Imagine what that does for him. Grandkids, great grandkids, like we're breaking generational curses over here.
Yeah. No, that's such a beautiful thing, beautiful picture of God's redemption and restoration. Thank you guys for both being on the show. If you're watching and you're enjoying, or you're listening on our podcast and you enjoy The Redeemed Man, we encourage you to leave a rating or review. Let us know so that we can get this out to other men and let them know what we're doing and what God is doing. Thank you guys for sharing your story. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
God bless.
Thank you for having us.